And none of this was ever fully disclosed or fully public before May 7th. Of course, there were pieces of this that were redacted or leaks that came out, but now you actually have the official files being released from the government. And, we've had a lot of UFO sightings and stories that were made public by certain individuals throughout the years, but nothing official that had been recognized by, the government in this way. And these files have been slowly building for a long, long time. Now, the most recent chunk of the files covers 2019 through 2024. And in some ways, it's maybe the more bizarre because it's not this like grainy archival footage from the Cold War. This is like infrared sensor data from U.S. military operating in an active military theater within the last 5 years. Like all of us were alive when these actual like images and videos were taken. And there are actually more than 20 videos in this release shot by military sensors in locations from Syria, Japan, Iraq, the UAE, the Gulf of Oman. And the objects described in these images range from small, fast-moving white specks to metallic, elliptical shapes hovering at altitude to what one report calls a bouncy ball shape. And a June 2024 infrared sensor recording over the Gulf of Oman shows an object being tracked by a U.S. aircraft over the waters near the UAE. And then it just quickly accelerates out of frame. But the single most striking report in the modern sort of, disclosure section is what the files describe as a, quote, super hot orb. One of the hottest orbs that they've ever found in space. This orb is sexy, dude. And they encounter it near a suspected government facility in a mountainous region. Now, the exact location of this region is heavily redacted. But here's what the documents say happened. This is the story. You have a military aircraft on a nighttime search mission, and it detects a single orb. And it is described through the radar and infrared as super hot, and it's close to the ground. The orb then moved eastward at a high rate of speed and then split into two objects. The crew continues to pursue it, and then the two objects split further into 4 and then into 5 orbs, each flaring up sequentially and remaining stationary and then dimming one by one until they all vanished. And then the aircraft broke off pursuit. So, what do we do with that? The Pentagon's official position on this stated plainly on the war.gov/UFO portal, and they basically just once again said this is an unresolved case. Some researchers who have reviewed that footage have offered some, more mundane skeptical positions. They say diffraction patterns from hot jet engines can produce these like star-shaped or potentially even orb-shaped artifacts in infrared sensors. Fast-moving specks can be a commercial drone or an optical illusion when you're at a certain altitude. That's like a very genuine explanation that possibly makes all the sense in the world. But an orb that splits into 5 objects and then emits light in all directions, and then even outpaces military aircraft before just completely vanishing. That particular case doesn't have, the most mundane explanation available to us. It's just a little, that one you read and you're like, all right, maybe there's like a weird sort of, parallax thing where you're at a certain distance and it's moving faster. I don't know. It's just a weird thing that they put in the report. And then there's also the Kazakhstan report. This is a bright object observed by multiple sources making what they say are 90-degree turns at speed. So for context, if you're not a aerospace engineer, any aircraft capable of making 90-degree turns at the speeds described in these reports would require structural materials and jet propulsion systems that we don't think exist in the world. Like, at least they're not publicly known in aerospace programs across any of, the major power players, America, Russia, China. This 90-degree turn at the high velocity is something beyond traditional physics or aerodynamics. It's something else that, we can talk about in a second. But there are obviously people in the online space, specifically in the UAP space, that have talked about this, and they've looked through the files and they've given their own sort of analysis as to what's going on. When the files dropped, people went crazy. Like the website war.gov/UFO is going crazy. 340 million hits in a single day. 340 million website interactions in the first day. The server infrastructure of the United States Department of War, one of the most powerful government bodies, struggled to keep up with people trying to go through and read the documents. That alone tells you just how much public interest has been building on this specific topic. But of course, the reactions to this have been split, and there's kind of like three camps that people fall in, you know? So the first camp you could say are, the believers who went looking for confirmation, and some of them feel that they found it on Instagram and on X. The 4-foot-tall crewmen in spacesuits from the 1966 FBI memo that we talked about, that one immediately goes viral. Screenshots of the memo alongside text like, they knew, and, this is an official FBI document and no one's talking about it. The Buzz Aldrin Apollo 11 report spread similarly. And then, of course, Barack Obama's 2021 statement that there are things that I can't tell you on air about UFOs that have been, recirculating at this time. And people are now framing it as like a retroactive confirmation, like, oh, Obama knew the whole time and, he was like hiding it. David Grush's congressional testimony, like I talked about before, where he, said that there was recovered non-human aircraft and biological material, that also resurged, as the context around this release. And the skeptics looked at the same files and they saw something completely different. So on Reddit, you have responses from our UFO or, r Ask Reddit, and it's super divided. One of the top comments in one of the threads about the release put it plainly and says this. I don't know who wrote it, so I'm sorry if I'm reading your comment without, giving you credit. But it says, UAP can literally be a bird, camera distortion, or a helium balloon. And of course, several aerospace engineers and physicists commenting in those threads went through the modern military footage and pointed out that many of the objects, including the star-shaped ones, in their opinion, are almost certainly infrared refractions or diffractions, and basically just like visual artifacts from jet engine heat signatures. So when the infrared is looking at a jet engine, the heat from the engine can actually create these weird sort of diffracted visual cues that then get reported as something that they're not. Now, the consensus in the skeptical communities is that the files are interesting, as historical documents and giving us a look into, what the internal memos during the Cold War were and that kind of thing. But the gap between unexplained and extraterrestrial is what they would say is wishful thinking, that this is not actual evidence, but this is just a bunch of people that want to believe. And then there's maybe a third camp, and this is the most politically charged, and maybe you can belong to two of the camps at once. You have the believers that get confirmed, you have the, skeptics that get confirmed with their skepticism. They're like, oh, this is BS. And then the third camp is like the distraction theory camp. Now, almost immediately after the UFO files dropped, a counter-narrative emerges across all the platforms, and they say that the timing here is not just a coincidence. February 2nd, 2026, just 3 months before the UFO files were released, the Justice Department made publicly like 3 million pages of the Epstein files just available, and they were forced to do that through, a law that was passed. And according to a New York Times report, Donald Trump is referenced in those Epstein documents over 38,000 times. Not a great look for Trump to be associated with Epstein so many times in the files, either through Epstein talking to him or talking about him or different places that they both were. So you have the Epstein files that drop and everyone goes crazy. And then, of course, you have, shortly thereafter, the UFO files that drop. Now, on Reddit, there's a thread titled, "Are Trump's UFO files a distraction from Epstein?" And of course, that gathered a ton of traction. And the argument is pretty clear. The Epstein files, reference Trump a ton, and it's deeply damaging and politically inconvenient for Trump and his administration. And plus, the Epstein files are highly redacted, and supposedly there are even more files that haven't even been released. So for the last few months, many have been calling for the files to be unredacted or to disclose all the rest of the files that haven't been made public to ensure accountability for those who are responsible. And they've been calling for the remainder of everything to just get put out in the open so we can actually see and hold accountable those that were involved in it, right? Like, it's kind of crazy that you have Epstein and all these other people that are, in these concentric circles of, connection with him. Either, they are completely unaware of what he's doing in relationship, or they're aware of what he has done in the past and overlooked it because it's convenient for their business, or they're fully aware of what he has done and what he's doing now, and they're just ignoring it. Or, the most deviant circle is that they're fully aware and complicit and potentially even engaging in these highly disgusting criminal affairs. And, in these files, you have all these people connected, but yet only Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison. Only one person. Like, and she's in a cushy prison, like walking around playing tennis all day.
Or someone else in prison, but
Yeah, I mean, Epstein might not. Epstein might just be busted out of here, chilling on a yacht somewhere.
Well, I meant he's no longer with us, but
maybe he's not with us. Where he is, I don't know. He might be near Cancun or something.
Tampa Pete or whatever.
It might be. West Palm Beach Pete.
Palm Beach Pete.
Who knows?